Story is told about a young boy who lived around the beginning of the 20th century who had never seen a circus. When he heard one was coming to town, he begged his dad to give him some money so that he might see the circus. So there was a negotiation, and he did a little bit of extra work, and when the day the circus arrived, the father gave him a dollar bill. You can see how old this story is. Gave him a dollar bill, and the young boy went off to see the circus. The circus parade was forming, and the boy stood in line and watched with amazement as the elephants and the other animals passed by. He saw bands and little people and big people, the animal trainers, and last of all, the clowns. He was thrilled. He'd never seen anything like it. And when the last clown passed by, he gave him his dollar and went home. He thought that was the circus. Didn't realize that there was a big tent and a show to be seen. In a sense, this glimpse of the parade is repeated in the gospel story on the second Sunday of Lent. On the first Sunday, we always hear the temptation story in the desert. On the second Sunday, we always hear about this transfiguration that took place on the mountaintop. We read from different gospels, and this year it happens to be Mark's version. Somehow the disciples who have this glimpse of Jesus transfigured in some ways, clothes changing, and Moses and Elijah appearing, they thought that was the kingdom, that was the victory, and they wanted to stay on the mountaintop. Jesus says, no, you've got to go down. You've got to go down, and the Son of Man must be crucified. He must suffer and die. But he also could have said, or he did say, that he was going to rise from the dead. The disciples didn't quite know what that was all about, but Jesus is trying to tell them, that's the beginning of the kingdom. It's not what's going on up here. That's a glimpse. The reality is down below. In Mark's gospel, the Transfiguration focuses on two questions. Who is this Jesus? And secondly, what is expected of those who follow Jesus? In a way, the disciples are beginning to have an understanding that Jesus is the Messiah, but they still haven't accepted the fact that the Messiah must suffer and die. Over and again, the disciples fail to understand. Mark continues in his gospel to respond to the question, well, what is expected of those who follow Jesus? And the two are quite connected. Jesus says, the one who follows me must also suffer, must take up his cross and follow me. The Transfiguration story comes in the midst of proclaiming this difficult message. And some would say it's preparing, steeling almost the disciples for the tragedy that is to become and the victory that will be won. Most modern-day scripture scholars interpret this passage as something happening to Jesus, but others also say that the disciples themselves were transformed. They were changed. Their horizon was widened to include this possibility of the Messiah suffering and dying. Lent is an annual retreat, in a sense, that you and I are asked to see how it is that we are the disciple of the Lord. Sometimes you and I are content with the bare minimum. We're happy enough with the parade. We don't go into the tent to see the real show because that sometimes would be demanding of us. We might be complacent in many areas of our life, including the spiritual dimension. So Lent poses the question, when was the last time I read a book that had a religious theme about it? We have a library full of them if you wanted to take some out during Lent. When was the last time you spent some real quality time in prayer? When was the last time you volunteered to actually feed the hungry or help someone in need? When was the last time I celebrated the sacrament of penance? I can answer Wednesday, when we had a day of recollection for priests. But we all need to see how that sacrament can be part of our Lenten observance. As I mentioned last week, and there's details in the bulletin, on March 20 and 21 throughout the diocese, there will be extra opportunities to celebrate that sacrament. None of us can be content just watching the parade. We need to know that there is much more to living out our Christian commitment.